How you doing? This is Matt from Mattrooms and Mutterings, and today we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk about the new Han Solo movie, which I finally saw on the weekend. Before we get into my review of this movie, I just want to set the scene a little bit. So, I just want to talk about, firstly, how I see the other movies of these modern four, which have come out in the last couple of years, where I rate them. Then we want to talk about why was there so much hate for this Solo movie, and then I'm going to talk about the movie itself and give a bit of an analysis of the movie and what I thought about it. But let's just start with, where do I rate these four movies? So, if any of you watched my last Star Wars review, I reviewed The Last Jedi, and my feelings were mixed at the time, but since then I've really come to despise that movie. The reason is it's because of the way it handled Luke Skywalker and a whole bunch of other stuff which I talk about in my video, which if you want to go through my channel you'll find it. I review The Last Jedi and look at why they missed an awesome chance to use Luke Skywalker and tell a great story that Star Wars fans would have loved. I don't mind that he was a fallen hero. We can have fallen heroes and still have them treated well, but I really didn't like that. So I rate that movie at the bottom of my list. Next above it, I rate The Force Awakens. Now, I enjoyed The Force Awakens. I was a little bit underwhelmed by it at the cinemas. I didn't think it was as great, but that's probably because my expectations were really high. But I still enjoyed the movie. It was fun. It had massive flaws, which I've also talked about. And I mentioned some of that in my Last Jedi review, what some of those flaws were. And some of those were carried over into this movie. But it was a fun movie. J.J. Abrams showed that he had a great love for Star Wars, and he gave fans much of what they wanted to see. Wasn't the greatest Star Wars movie, but I enjoyed it. Then there's Rogue One. I rate that in the number 2 spot out of these new ones which have come out. I really enjoyed Rogue One. I thought, up until this weekend, I really thought it was the best of these new movies. Largely because of this reason. It was actually set in the real Star Wars world. If you look at my review on The Last Jedi, you'll see that I feel like they narrowed down the scope of the Star Wars universe. But in Rogue One, we get to see people in action in the same universe that feels like the same universe, the same technology, everything that we saw in A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, which are the pinnacle of the Star Wars series. So, I really enjoyed Rogue One, but it's been knocked off the number 1 spot, surprisingly, by perhaps the most hated before it comes out movie in the modern era, other than Ghostbusters, the reboot. The amount of hate this movie has gotten online, even before it was released, is phenomenal. And I'll put my hand up and say that I wasn't really looking forward to it. In fact, I remember having a debate on Christmas Day with my brother-in-law about who wants to see a Han Solo movie without Harrison Ford. Why did this movie get so much hate beforehand? Well, I think there's a few different reasons. One, a lot of people have lost faith in Kathleen Kennedy because of the direction she's taken, especially the Saga trilogy. I think an even bigger reason, and this has to do with her decisions and Rian Johnson's decisions, the way in which Luke Skywalker's character was dishonored and treated terribly by so many fans like myself in The Last Jedi really had people concerned and worried for Han Solo. And many people thought, even though it's Solo, a Star Wars story, that they were going to give the lead role over to other characters, kind of like they did with Mad Max Fury Road, which I did enjoy that movie. I'm not criticizing, but there was still, it felt like Mad Max was a co-star in his own movie. Some people felt like that sort of thing might happen. Many people knew about the production issues with the original directors fired and Ron Howard brought in to replace them. A lot of the feminist, over-the-top feminist messaging, which we've had in The Last Jedi and to a degree in The Force Awakens, had people really concerned that they were going to take this white male character and really just treat him in a disrespectful way like they did Luke Skywalker. So I really think that encapsulates a big reason why this movie was so hated. And I remember watching so many different YouTube videos from people like Geeks and Gamers and other channels talking about, we need to boycott this movie, we need to get Kathleen Kennedy fired, and all this sort of stuff. And so I've got to say, this had me going into this movie with trepidation. I wouldn't say I had super low expectations. In one sense, I had high expectations because Ron Howard is a fantastic director. In fact, Ron Howard has made an inverted commas Star Wars movie before that I really love called Willow. Now, it's not in the Star Wars universe, but it's the hero's journey following Willow and another character played by Val Kilmer, and following their journey as they rescue a fantasy world. Now, it was George Lucas's story. Ron Howard directed it, and I just knew, partly because Ron Howard is a good director, but also because of his working with George Lucas before, that Ron Howard understood Star Wars. He understands the hero's journey, and he knows how to make a really good movie. So there was part of me going into this movie thinking, Ron Howard's going to do a really good job. But then I've got on the other side the decisions that have been made in especially The Last Jedi and the direction they're wanting to push the Star Wars stories and move them away from the original characters and really downplay the original characters made me really worried. Well, what are they going to do with Han Solo in this movie? Is this really going to be a movie which honors, for some people, their favorite character in the whole of the Star Wars universe? It's a flip of the coin for me between Luke and Han. Both wonderful characters, both go through their own journey as a hero in the original trilogy. Even though it's centered around Luke, we see Han Solo go from being the rascally rogue to the lovable rogue to the actual rebellion leader. Well, not of the whole rebellion, but he's a leader in the rebellion. And so there was real concerns for a lot of us about what this movie was going to be like. But I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Let's first talk about the biggest elephant in the room, Alden Ehrenreich, the guy who played Han Solo. I really was not looking forward to seeing another actor play Han Solo. Harrison Ford, he's kind of like a Mel Gibson style figure, or Sean Connery, or he's just such an iconic actor that no matter what role he does, he makes it his own, and you find it really hard to picture other people in that role. Now, maybe Sean Connery is a bad example of that because we've seen other people play his iconic role of Bond. But there are some actors who just, the way they play a role, it's their presence, their screen presence, their acting ability, their whole personality, everything is wrapped up in that character, and their character really shines through, and you associate that character with that actor. I mean, think of it this way. How many other people can picture anyone other than Tony Stark playing Iron Man in the near future? It's very hard to picture that. It's very hard to picture somebody else playing Thor in the near future because some actors just take roles and make them their own. And Harrison Ford did that with Han Solo. He was fun. He had the right kind of humor, the balance between heroism and also a little bit of indecision / cowardice in parts of the movie where you can see that that's overridden by his greed. He's not really the best good guy, but he's not a bad guy. He's sort of in between. The way that Harrison Ford played that, he did some very similar stuff in Indiana Jones, and he's just such a great actor to have somebody else step into those shoes. But Heinrich wasn't great, but he pulled it off. There were parts where I was watching this movie, there were times when I saw him and I thought, that is Han Solo. And then there are other times where it put me out of the movie because I'm like, well, that doesn't feel like Han Solo. But overall, I would say that Heinrich's impersonation, if you want to call it, of Harrison Ford, or at least his interpretation on the character Han Solo, I'd give it a solid 8 out of 10. He did a really good job. He may not be the best actor, but his voice is a little bit kind of high-pitched, whiny for me. For Han Solo's character, I didn't think that was perfect. That's why I took a couple of points off. But he was lovable. He was heroic. He was also out for himself. He sucked at taking orders. He's cocky. He was everything that we could kind of see a younger version of Han Solo being. So I really enjoyed that. I also really enjoyed Donald Glover. I thought some people said that Donald Glover was the best part of this movie as Lando Calrissian. He wasn't the best part of the movie for me. I thought he was good. I kind of felt like his charm at certain points was a little bit forced. Although my friend who I went and saw the movie said, yeah, but you could kind of look at it as a young version of Lando where his charm isn't quite as strong. And I thought, that's not a bad point. He was great. Lando Calrissian played by Donald Glover, was great in this movie. They were both believable as their characters, and basically probably 10 minutes into the movie I stopped really thinking about where's the original characters, where's Harrison Ford and Billy D. Williams, because these guys did a really good job. So from that perspective, I enjoyed this movie. From the perspective of Ron Howard's storytelling, the way he directed this movie, I also really enjoyed it because he, as I said before, he understands the hero's journey. Now, by the end of the movie, Han Solo is not fully the classic hero that we come to expect the noble warrior to be at the end of a movie, because this is just the beginning of his story, and he doesn't fully develop into that hero until years later when he meets Luke and Obi-Wan and joins the rebellion finally. But in this movie, we see the elements of a young, capable, but inexperienced guy who just needs to get out of his home planet, gets himself into some bad situations, manages to find his way out of it, manages to stumble himself into some good opportunities, manages to get himself into some really big trouble way over his head, which is Han Solo to the core. How often do we see him in Star Wars, whether it's The Force Awakens, whether it's The Empire Strikes Back, whether it's Return of the Jedi, he's always getting himself in situations which are way out of his depth, and yet he somehow manages to come through them. And in this movie, he comes through it in an incredibly clever way, and I'm not going to give that away, but I thought it was well done. Ron Howard developed the hero's journey in this movie really well, and for me, that's what Star Wars is about. Star Wars, yes, it has lightsabers, it has X-Wings, it has the Force, it has great battles, it has some really good one-liners, it has great characters. All of those things help to make it so iconic. But at the heart of what Star Wars is about the hero's journey, and this movie does that really well. I loved Woody Harrelson's character as Tobias Beckett. I thought he did play your classic cowboy brigand very well, who's not really a good guy but is willing to take Han Solo under his wing. I thought Kira was also used really well in this movie. I thought that the most annoying character in Star Wars history, of some have described L3, wasn't really that annoying. And if you look at her as kind of, I really wouldn't be surprised if she was put in this movie to kind of mock a lot of the social justice warrior culture which is out there in the world today, because she's always going on about her cause of freeing the droids. Everyone else is exasperated about it. Some of them think she's a little bit crazy. Lando, every time she goes on about it, kind of rolls his eyes. But it's done in a humorous way. It's not done over the top too annoyingly, and she ends up being taken out of the movie. As you'll see, I won't give it away exactly what happens as you watch the movie. So I thought from a storyline perspective, character perspective, this movie did a really good job. In a world-building perspective, it did something very well that I felt like The Last Jedi didn't do very well. It expanded the Star Wars world. It gave us a look at what Corellia was like, this iconic place that Han Solo's from, where they make the Corellian YT-1300, where they build the Imperial Navy warships, the Star Destroyers and the Victory-class Star Destroyers, and all the stuff that they build. It gives us this real insight into multiple different worlds, where we get to see them on one particular world where they're in a battle zone. It looks kind of like something out of Band of Brothers, which was really cool to see Tobias Beckett's character in that situation. I thought the way that he tried to lose Han, and then the way Han got back to him, was really quite creative. The way that we see the universe develop, and the prototype of the rebellion in aspects of this movie, which when you watch it, you'll see what I'm talking about. If you've already seen it, you know what I'm talking about. It expanded the Star Wars world. It explained some things. It explained some things we didn't need explained, like, why do we need to see how Han Solo got his last name? Why couldn't his last name just be Han Solo? Like, I thought that was a bit odd. The way he's given his last name in this movie is just like, why can't it just be his name? Why do we have to explain how he got his last name? Can't it just be his parents' name that he got? Which, if you read the expanded universe, that's what it kind of implies. The Solos are a family on Corellia. There's a few of them. He's got a brother. So it's a little bit strange the way they develop. They explain a couple of things like that. But it doesn't take away from the movie. It was a very interesting movie. The way they explain what a parsec is, the Castle Run, was nothing like what I pictured it, except for the fact that it was really dangerous and Han Solo was cocky about how he approached it. That they got across really well. So there was a lot about this movie that I really loved. Now, for those of you who've been reading reviews and hearing about what this movie is about, it's basically a heist. It's Ocean's 11 in the Star Wars world. Now, Ocean's 8 is coming out next weekend. We'll see how that goes. But for me, I really enjoyed that. It was kind of like, when I think of Han Solo's character, I think of him like a cowboy. I think of him like Billy the Kid's character in Blaze of Glory. I think him as a similar sort of character as that, but not quite the same level of bad guy. So to see them robbing a train to get explosive fuel just reminded me of so many cowboy movies I've seen where they got to rob the train to get the nitrogen to go do another job or to pay off this guy or do whatever. So it was very much like watching a Western in the Star Wars universe, which is a big part of the inspiration for the Star Wars universe. There was elements of samurai, elements of Western, elements of World War II, all sort of mixed in together, and we get to see a really big emphasis on the Western aspects in this movie, even the way that there's some people who keep foiling Han Solo and Beckett's plans in this movie, which keep coming along. It's kind of like the annoying other gang which you see in cowboy and Western movies. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the heist aspect. I really enjoyed the sort of futuristic cowboy aspect. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Serenity and Firefly. It really reminded me of that sort of story. It was fun. It was lighthearted. It was enjoyable. It was adventurous. It was action-packed. I really actually enjoyed this movie, and part of the reason I probably enjoyed it so much is because I went in with really low expectations because of all the hype. I knew Ron Howard could make a good movie, so my expectations were mixed, but I did not expect Heinrich to do a good job of Han Solo. I did not expect Donald Glover to do a decent job of Lando Calrissian. I wasn't really sure why they were making this movie except to make money, which it looks like it's not going to do. But I came out of this movie thinking, you know what? This movie understands Star Wars. Yes, it's not about the Skywalker clan, but it understands the hero's journey. It understands struggle against evil. It understands a degree of redemption of the hero, which you kind of see that happen with Han in this movie, but it sort of just plants the seed. You can still see at the end of it he's out for himself, but at least he's a decent guy. He's still willing to believe in people. He's still willing to try and do the right thing. He's not the hero that we've come to know, but he is at least something of a hero. He's someone worth watching, and I really would love to see the sequel. I never thought I would say that. So this is my review of Solo, A Star Wars Story. I'm really interested to hear what you think of this movie. I really want to have some discussion, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you see this video. Tell me what you thought. If you haven't seen it yet, I'm sorry if I spoiled anything for you. But if you have seen it, let me know what you thought. I really enjoyed it. I thought there's parts of the movie which probably could have been improved. But overall, I thought it was well done. I would give this movie an 8 out of 10. An 8 out of 10, that's a pretty high score. I'd give it a 4 out of 5. I enjoyed it that much. I'd probably give Rogue One about a 7.5 out of 10. And I would give The Force Awakens 6.5 out of 10. And I would give The Last Jedi about 4.5 out of 10. I rate this as the best of these modern Star Wars movies. And I really have this one request. If someone who knows Kathleen Kennedy or Kathleen Kennedy sees this, please do us Star Wars fans a favor. Fire Rian Johnson and put Ron Howard in charge of the next trilogy you're making. Or at least put him in charge of the Anthem movies you're making. Or make him more involved in Star Wars in some way, because this guy understands the Star Wars universe. He understands the hero's journey. He understands these characters. He is a great director. He did a great job. He came in halfway through and still managed to put out this movie, which told a fun, very simple, very basic story. Nothing revolutionary, but it was fun. It was enjoyable. That's my review. Tell me what you thought. This is Matt from Mattrooms Muttering signing off. I'll catch you later.